Night Bus Hero by Anjali Hero.
Hello there, my name is Miss Franks and I'm a Year 7 tutor and a Business Studies and ICT teacher, and I'm going to read to you Chapter 16 of The Night Bus Hero, and it's called Mapping Out a Turf War. At exactly 3:30, when the whole house was quiet, I ran downstairs with my skateboard and hurriedly put on my shoes. I was trying to open the front door as silently as possible when Mum appeared in the hallway. "Where are you off to?" she asked. Lisa had the afternoon off, so Hercules was clinging on to Mum's back like a turtle shell. "You're still grounded, remember?" "I forgot something at the soup kitchen," I said, which was kind of true. I had left the new t-shirt Mr. Cheng and Mei Li had given me there. "Plus," I said, "I would help out at tea time." Mum smiled. "Really?" "Yeah." "Mum, can I have soup in the kitchen too?" asked Hercules, jumping off her back and squeezing past her to cling on to me instead. He had obviously been playing with some gold glitter because when I pushed him away, my trouser legs were covered in a trail of it. "So, is it okay if I go?" I asked Mum. "I guess, but take your jacket," she said, as she suddenly reached out and ruffled my hair, "and come back straight after, all right? Hercules, how about we head to our kitchen for some cereal and make that into our very own special kitchen soup?" I stared at Mum's back as she headed down the corridor to the kitchen, with Hercules bouncing behind her on his imaginary pogo stick. She hadn't ruffled my hair in years, not since at least 2 Christmases ago. Putting my hair back the way it should be, I jumped onto my skateboard and headed out towards the high street. I found the narrow alleyway between the pizza shop and the train station and ran through it and out onto the other side, heading to the back wall of the station where the Catwoman lived. Mei Li was already there. She was sitting on the floor playing with 2 small cats. The Catwoman sat in her deck chair with a much larger grey cat purring on her lap, but Thomas wasn't with them. A train thundered below my feet, making the ground rattle as I went over to the Catwoman and Mei Li. I stopped a few feet away. "Don't be shy," said the Catwoman. "Take a seat and say hello to my babies." Remembering how one of her babies had hissed at me last time, I went and sat down slowly on the floor next to Mei Li. I waited for one of the cats to come up to me, but none of them did. Maybe they thought I was one of the boys who bullied the Catwoman too. I watched as the cats walked around in circles like models on a catwalk. All of them had tiny brown collars with little tubes on them and bells that twinkled when they moved. "They're just sniffing you out," whispered Mei Li. "They did the same to me when I first came here with Dad." I shrugged. I didn't want to touch the cats anyway, in case they were dirty. What I really wanted was to know if Thomas was coming. As if she could read my thoughts, the Catwoman picked up the cat on her lap like it was a baby and held it out to me, saying, "He'll be here soon, look." I stared, not sure if I was meant to hold the cat like a baby too. The Catwoman smiled, her half-yellow teeth poking out. "Take the note from Tabby's collar, boy," she said, giving Mei Li a wink. Sitting up on my knees, I looked more closely at Tabby's collar. Sticking out of the end of the little tube was a scrap of something white. Taking it, I unrolled a tiny crumpled sheet filled with curly handwriting and read it aloud. "We'll be with you by 4. Hope the boy isn't tricking us. I'm close to breaking the code. Giving Tabby some tuna. Thomas." I frowned at the symbols and looked up at the Catwoman. "What are those squiggles under his name?" I asked. "Latin alphabet symbols for L and M," she explained, as if that made it any clearer. "All of us homeless folk have our own symbols to make sure that whenever we need to send a message out, everyone knows for sure it's us, and LM is Thomas's." I stared back at the tube on Tabby's collar, wondering why Thomas's symbol was L and M. "So your cats, they take messages to people, kind of like carrier pigeons?" The Catwoman smiled. "Exactly. All I have to do is train them up and off they go." "That's cool," I exclaimed before I could stop myself. Yes, it is rather," agreed the Catwoman. "What's all this about then?" Mei Li and the Catwoman and me all jumped at the deep voice booming from behind us. "Thomas!" cried Mei Li. She jumped up and gave him a hug. "You came!" Feeling excited, I jumped up too, but then feeling stupid, sat right back down. Of course I came. I'll do anything for the best hot jacket potato maker in London, he said, winking at her. Then he turned and glared at me with such force that I could feel the heat coming out of his eyes. His beard had grown longer and his face looked darker than I remembered. And now that I could see him properly in the light and right in front of me, I knew for sure it had never been him at Piccadilly Circus. He was much shorter than the real thief had been, and his beard was less fluffy. He was still wearing his long black coat and yellow hat, but now he had a green scarf wrapped around his neck, as if it was December and not May. What have you got to say to me, he said, other than sorry for trying to ruin your life, that is. I really am sorry, I stuttered, looking at the pavement so I could escape his eyes. I'd never felt so bad about anything before, not even when I had accidentally hurt Hercules or made Lavinia at school run away so fast that she had an asthma attack. For what? Said Thomas. For pushing my trolley in the lake or for telling the police I'm the most wanted man in London? Both, I said, scuffing my hand along the ground. I really thought it was you. The real thief looked just like you. Thomas didn't reply. Wanted to show him that I was serious about helping, I stood up and, taking the folded pieces of paper from my pocket, held them out to him. What are these? Asked Thomas, taking them. I shrugged. Comic strips? Said Millie, leaning over to look. I shook my head. Ideas for how we could maybe catch the real thief and make sure the police stop arresting all the homeless people. Didn't have you down as an artist, said Thomas, turning over the second page. Is that you pointing out the actual thief? Grinned Millie, pointing a strip showing a whole line of men wearing false beards. I nodded. I personally quite like the idea of me in a cape, said Thomas, giving a sniff. Decent ideas, he added, as he handed me back the drawings without saying anything else. Millie didn't say anything either, so I shoved them quickly back into my pocket, wishing I had never made them. Everyone clearly thought they were stupid. There was a long silence during which my legs itched to turn right round and leave, but I wasn't a coward, so I waited, holding my breath in the strange quiet. If you really want to help, you need to tell me everything you saw that night, said Thomas finally, cracking open the awkward silence that had fallen on us, in as much detail as you can. Think you can do that? I let my breath go and nodded, and this time I looked up into his face. His two sharp eyes crashed right into mine, as if they were searching for something hidden away. Proceed, he ordered. He sat down on the empty deck chair next to the Catwoman and listened with his eyes shut tight and his fingers coming to a point on his lips as I described what I had seen at Piccadilly Circus for what felt like the 100th time. When I finished, I waited for him to say something, but he continued sitting with his eyes shut for the longest time. Then, without any warning, his eyes flew open and he leaned forward, making all of us, Mei Ling and the Catwoman too, jump. Now, I want you to describe him again, but this time close your eyes. I want you to focus all your energies on just that man. Try and get your memory to scan over every single part of him, like an X-ray. Start off with his silver hair and describe him for me again, right down to the shoes he was wearing. Scared by the look on Thomas's face, I shut my eyes and tried my best to remember that exact moment when the thief had bowed and looked up at the billboards. I described everything I could see in my mind, from the strange circle of silver hair on his head to the remote control in his hand, to his wrinkly black coat, to the white trainers that had seemed to glow in the dark, to the tiny shine of something gold on his finger. But there was something new to tell. Something shining on his finger? Asked Thomas. You never mentioned that before. Didn't I? Mei Ling and the Catwoman shook their heads. Is it important? Might be, said the Catwoman. Was it a ring? I closed my eyes again and concentrated hard, making myself see the thief again as he took off his hat and held it out before him to take his bow. Yes, I said, scrunching my eyes shut even tighter. Can you see anything on it? Asked Thomas, his voice getting closer to my ears. I shook my head. Can't see. I'm too far away. But it was definitely gold. And round, and it was on the little finger of his right hand. He was holding out his hat with his right hand when he took the bow. Ah, A pinky ring, said Thomas, as I opened my eyes. At least that's a new clue we didn't have before. What about the 3 lions on the fountain steps, I asked. Wasn't that a real clue? I tried looking it up online, but I couldn't find out what it meant. Oh, that's easy. Here, look. Thomas reached into his coat pocket, taking out a sheet of paper which he unravelled a huge map of all the bus routes in London. It had been folded and unfolded so many times that it looked as if it was about to fall apart. On the front of it, written in big letters, were the words, "To our favourite night rider from all the drivers at TfL." I had never seen a map like it before, and I guess Maylee hadn't either, because we both leaned in closer to see it in much more detail. Each and every bus route had been given its own bright colour, and they swirled and wound and spread past tiny drawings of parks and museums and palaces, like a giant octopus with its legs splitting out in all different directions. Across the map, Thomas had circled some of the places and written a number and a symbol beside them. I followed Thomas's finger to a stop marked Piccadilly Circus and a drawing of a statue marked as Eros, which made me think of Mum and Dad and how they would have shaken their heads at the fact that even real maps had labelled it wrong. Underneath the picture, Thomas had drawn the symbol of the 3 diagonals I had seen being sprayed, and next to it, in the teeniest, tiniest capital letters, were the words, "This is not a safe place." I'd been recording the location, the object that was stolen, the symbol and the meaning of that symbol for all the thefts, explained Thomas. Take a look. We crowded over the map, Mayling's fingers resting on the different coloured bus routes, mine moving up to where a big 1 was circled. The 1 was next to the picture of a suitcase marked PB. Without even knowing that I was doing it, I began to read all of Thomas's notes out loud. Number 1 location, Paddington Station, stolen, Paddington Bear, symbol, the spear, meaning, be ready to defend yourself. Number 2 location, Selfridges, stolen, winged angel, symbol, a circle, meaning, nothing to be gained here. Number 3 location, Piccadilly Circus, stolen, the bow of Eros, symbol, 3 stripes, meaning, this is not a safe place. Number 4 location, Great Ormond Street Hospital, stolen, Tinkerbell, symbol, hat, meaning, a kind gentleman lives here. Number 5 location, Leicester Square, stolen, Mary Poppins umbrella, Charlie Chaplin stick and Paddington Bear's sandwich, symbol, upside down triangle, meaning, road spoiled, too many hobos. Number 6 location, Fortman and Mason, stolen, lanterns, symbol, 2 rings joined together, meaning, police here will frown on hobos. I finished and took a deep breath. Whoa. And all of the signs are really part of the secret code, asked Maylee. Thomas nodded. All the symbols are part of the homeless code, a global code developed over decades. Or the tramps code, or the hobos code, interrupted the Catwoman, depending on what people are calling us. It's the one code we all use to warn someone if a place is dangerous or to give them a hint about what help they might find there, if there's any to be had, explained Thomas. We usually hide them pretty well, so only someone who's truly one of us can find or understand them. This thief, whoever he is, must know someone from the streets. He's got to know the code exists and what the symbols mean, but he's definitely not one of us. No one who's had to sleep rough would ever give our code away, especially not to the police or the press. I wish I knew what all the symbols meant and where to find them, said Maylee. Well, there's a fair few to learn, said the Catwoman, wrapping a cat's towel around her fingers. Can take years to suss them all out. It's like an alphabet, except you never get to see all the letters at once. And sometimes the meaning behind the letters change, or the letters get drawn differently. Now I knew I hadn't been able to find anything on the internet. The code was still so secret that even the best search engines in the world hadn't found them out yet. You've forgotten to add the robbery from last night, said the Catwoman, giving Thomas a poke and leaning back in her deck chair. There was another one, I asked. I really needed to start reading Dad's newspaper more. Mei Ling nodded. A dragon statue, she said. It was on the news this morning. And not just any old dragon, added the Catwoman. One that lived right outside the Royal Courts of Justice. Best place to get a divorce in all the land. Or so I've heard. I only got wind of it on the way here, said Thomas, drawing out a pen from his coat as if it was a sword. Bending over the map, he drew a circle around the picture of the building near the words Fleet Street. Then he added a symbol of a long cross and the words, religious talk will get you a meal here, beside it. Now this is a strange one, he muttered. Why is it strange? I asked. Because we have special codes to mark out courts or places where a judge might be found. But this sign is for a church or a member of the clergy, answered Thomas, stroking his beard the same way the Catwoman was stroking the cat on her lap. See here. Thomas pointed to all the other robbery points. Each symbol the thief used so far is directly linked to the place he's robbed in some way, even if it's in quite a funny way. For example, Thomas pointed to the picture of the spear next to Paddington Bear's suitcase. This one is a warning for everyone to defend themselves. It might be a warning for us to defend ourselves against the thief and all the things he's about to do. But it's also funny, because why would anyone need to defend themselves against a cartoon bear who is himself in search of a home? Then this one here, said Thomas, pointing to Selfridges and the circle next to it. That sign is to signal that there's nothing to be gained here, as in no food or water or help. But it's been drawing on a place which has everything you could ever need under one roof, providing you've money, of course. So in actual fact, it really is of no value for someone who's homeless and looking for the basics of food and shelter. Then Fortman and Mason, the two ring symbols there means police will frown on hobos. There might not be any real police there, but it's still a shop filled with posh people who really would frown on us and call the police on us if they could. And the 3 lines at Piccadilly Circus there, warning us it's not a safe place, might be because it's a pickpocket hotspot. What about this one? I asked, pointing at the hat drawn next to Great Ormond Street. That's a nicer one, said Thomas. The kindly gentleman the symbol references could be J.M. Barry, the man who wrote Peter Pan and gifted all the money from those books to help the sick people the hospital looks after. Or it could just be a nod to all the doctors inside. Or maybe it's Peter Pan himself. Who knows? My personal favourite is Leicester Square, said the Catwoman, giving a chuckle as she pointed to it on the map, telling us there are too many hobos in a place where Charlie Chaplin and Mary Poppins are sitting pretty does have a whiff of the genius about it. I frowned at Mei Ling, who gave me a frown right back. I was glad she wasn't so much of a teacher's pet, that she could understand why both the Catwoman and Thomas were now chuckling. Ah, said Thomas, seeing our blank faces, because they're both without homes, see, he explained. Charlie Chaplin, the world's most famous hobo, a tramp even by name. And Mary Poppins? Asked Mei Ling. Oh, she's always flitting from one place to the next, said the Catwoman. Granted, she's a governess and she gets paid, but she doesn't really have a home either. Oh, yeah, said Mei Ling and me together. So you see, all the symbols of some sort of link to a place they've been sprayed on, even if it's a sort of humorous, sarcastic one. But yesterday's theft of the dragon isn't linked to the symbol of the cross that had been drawn. Not as far as I can figure out. So why is that? Has he used the wrong sign, or is he teasing us? He sighed. Just as I'm figuring it all out, he throws me a curveball. There just isn't any pattern that's obvious with this thief, except one, which is... None of the robberies are outside Zone 1, interrupted Mei Ling. Clever kid, remarked the Catwoman, as Mei Ling gave her ponytail an extra high flick. She can see a turf war when it's staring her in the face, even if no one else can. You mean a turf war like gangs in movies have, gasped Mei Ling. Not quite, laughed Thomas. Look here. What does all this bit of London have in common? He waved his hand over the whole of Zone 1. It has all the most expensive shops, said Mei Ling. Thomas shook his head. What else does it have, more than anywhere else in London? Parks, palaces, animals, tried Mei Ling again. The Catwoman shook her head. I'll give you a clue, she said, and pointed to herself and Thomas. Homeless people, I cried. Exactly, said Thomas. There's thousands of us sleeping rough in this area of London alone, and lots of people don't like it. It's a turf war that's been going on for as long as the city has been here. Business and governments want to kick us out instead of trying to help us," added the Catwoman, shaking her head. "So you think the thief is stealing all these strange things and drawing those signs so he can make the police think that—" Mei-Li didn't finish her sentence. Instead, she covered her mouth with her hands. "She's got it," whispered the Catwoman. She looked over to me to see if I had got it too. I had, but I was too busy thinking about what Thomas had said about it being a turf war to say anything. The whole thing was starting to sound like my computer game. On level 9, a group of aliens called the Zudaks were racing me to take over a land called Exted. Instead of using my small army against the massive Zoldak one, I secretly put up flags everywhere to make it seem as if the Zoldaks were already claiming Exted as their own. That made the Exted people rise up and begin to fight the Zoldaks back. And while they were busy fighting each other, I swept in for the real invasion and won. It was the same in this case too. The thief was blaming the people he was trying to get rid of for crimes they hadn't committed, and by making everyone else hate them too, was reaching his goal. The only difference was that the invisible thief was using yellow signs instead of flags to start the fights. The only thing we had to figure out was what he was trying to distract everyone from. Flags, white flags, with writing on them, and 2 blue dragons. Flags that had made Hercules giggle about toilets. And like a thundercrack, it came to me. "Hector, you all right?" asked Thomas, placing a hand on my shoulder. "You've gone all pale, lad." "The toilet signs," I whispered, tapping the map. "The toilet signs are the real flags."
Toilets? Mei-Li, Catwoman, Thomas, and the cats were all staring up at me puzzled. "My brother Hercules saw them," I explained. "To-let signs shaped like flags on all the buildings next to where the thefts took place. The same exact signs. White ones with 2 blue dragons. There was one on the platform where Paddington Bear was stolen, hanging above an old cafe, and lots on the flats next to the Children's Hospital, and on the office buildings near Piccadilly Circus. What if that is the real sign of the invasion and everything else is fake?" "It makes sense," said Catwoman, tapping Zone 1 on the map with her finger. "This is prime real estate. The most expensive part of one of the most expensive cities in the world. The last thing any property developer trying to rent out a building wants is a bunch of homeless people driving prices down. So stage some robberies of public property, get us blamed and drive us out," said Thomas, nodding. "Easy. And you're right, those signs, the ones with the blue dragons, they are everywhere. I see them all the time on my night rides. Maybe they could be the missing link." "Not just a head of hair, are you, Hector?" smiled Catwoman. I shrugged and gave a smile back, pushing my hair away from my face. "What about the to-let signs?" asked Mei-Li, looking more confused than I had ever seen her. "I don't get it." Wondering how a teacher's pet could possibly not get it, I explained everything in more detail. Her eyes slowly widened like 2 balloons being blown up as she finally understood. "But why would an invading force blame homeless people?" she asked as soon as I had finished. "Why not?" asked Thomas. "We can't defend ourselves, and there's no one to fight for us. We're just problems, remember? Drunkards and drug addicts and beggars who people are already frightened of. Sitting targets." Mei-Li shook her head. "That's horrible. The thief's got to be somebody with a lot of money and power to make all of this happen," muttered Catwoman. "And connections, too. A property owner with buildings all over London would have loads of places to hide the statues. How are we ever going to catch them?" "Hold on." Flipping his map over, Thomas's finger ran down the list of dates. "See here," he said. "I've been making a list of when the thief's been striking. Most of the time there isn't a pattern. Sometimes they'll take 2 nights in a row, and other times it will be a week between thefts. But there is one thing I've spotted." His finger jumped from one date on the list down to another and then a third. They've struck every Saturday since the thefts began, all at different times of the night. But today's Saturday, I said slowly. And we haven't got a clue about where he might strike next. Or what time, added Maylie. We all fell silent. Then suddenly, Catwoman pushed the cat that had been sleepily purring on her lap onto the floor. Thomas, she exclaimed. The cross. Why did he use the sign of the cross by the stolen dragon at the courts? Thomas shrugged. Maybe he's getting bored and scribbling any old sign now. Maybe it doesn't matter to him. Or, said Catwoman, her brown-green eyes shining, what if he's made a mistake? What if the sign was meant to be left at the next target? What does the cross sign mean again? I asked. It's one we'd leave at a church or at a place that has something to do with a church, she explained, like the home of a priest. Maybe you're right, said Thomas. Maybe tonight's target is a church. He sighed. But there are hundreds of churches across London, and plenty of them have statues. We all crowded around the map and stared at it as if it might give us the answer. Are the robberies all going from this side of London to this one? Asked Maylie, tilting her head and sliding her hand down from Paddington Station to the Royal Courts of Justice. Or are they all mixed up and jumping backwards and forwards? Thomas flipped his map over and then back again and counted things on his fingers. They've been jumping back and forth, he said finally, but only very slightly. The majority of the robberies have been moving down from west to east. Good spot, darling, said Catwoman, giving Maylie's arm a squeeze. I gave her a thumbs up too. And look, added Thomas, most of them have been along one main route, the longest night bus route there is. And the most expensive too, said Catwoman. It hits all the hotspots of London. We followed his finger as he traced a bright pink line labelled N15 that parted at Paddington Station, then ran down to Selfridges, passed by the statue of Anteros, went across Leicester Square, and carried on past the Royal Courts of Justice. The only two places that had been left out were the thefts at Fortnum and Mason and Great Ormond Street Hospital, which were on the opposite sides of the city to each other. Thomas's finger slowed to a halt as it reached the picture of a church labelled St. Paul's Cathedral. No, gasped Catwoman. Might just be, said Thomas. It's the next major stop on the bus route. I doubt they'll be hopping on a night bus to get their robberies, said Catwoman, shaking her head. Besides, they can't hit St. Paul's tonight. It's VE Day tomorrow, remember? They'll be having a choir concert tonight and a light show too. It'll be packed solid until at least gone midnight, and even after the whole place will still be lit up. It would be madness. But that gives us a time, a window of when they might act, said Thomas. And don't forget, the thief has that special remote control, I reminded everyone. I saw them. They turned every single light off with one click. And imagine it, said Thomas, jumping up from his chair and starting to pace up and down excitedly. Imagine robbing St. Paul's the night before VE Day. It would be a coup. Robbing one of the richest cathedrals with some of the most expensive statues in the world on one of the most important days in the world. It sounds like exactly what this thief would do. And the public would be furious. If people weren't already scared and angry and ready to drive us all out before, they definitely would be after that. If we're right, that is, interrupted Maylie. Let's tell the police, I said, hoping we had figured it all out. If we had, we would probably be heroes by tomorrow morning. I would have to share being famous with Maylie now, since she knew everything too. But I didn't mind, so long as everyone knew it was mainly me who had helped catch the thief. Now all the police had to do was go and watch the church and catch the real thief. Catwoman laughed. Tell the police? They'd never believe the likes of us, she said, gesturing to herself and Thomas. Or us, said Maylie, looking at me. We're just kids. They'd think we're making things up. Plus, they definitely wouldn't believe you. You've only just told them that Thomas was the thief. Thomas suddenly stopped walking and clicked his fingers with a loud snap. I've got a plan, he cried. Providing we're right about this, of course, but I can't do it myself. I'm going to need some help from someone brave enough and small enough to get in through a very tiny window. Turning to me and Mei Li, he swooped down on us like a human eagle and caught us each by the hand. Which one of you can come with me? He asked, his eyebrows squeezing together tight. And help me catch a thief. This is stupid, I muttered, as me and Mei Li hurried back down the alleyway and out onto the high street. It'll never work, he's mad. He's not mad, said Mei Li. He's brave. And the plan is brave. You just have to be brave too and not mess it up. I glared at Mei Li. It should have been her going tonight, not me. Who had to share a bedroom with their grandparents anyway? How was that even allowed? Or maybe it was a lie so that she could get out of helping. I'll come to yours before dinner, said Mei Li, to give you the freedom pass. Don't ring the doorbell or anything, I ordered. My bedroom window is at the front of the house on the right. Just throw something at it and I'll open it up so you can toss it in. Why can't I just knock for you like a normal person? Asked Mei Li. I can say you left something at the soup kitchen. No, I said more loudly than I should have. I really don't want anyone... I stopped myself, but it was too late. Mei Li stopped walking. You don't want anyone to see me. Is that what you were going to say? I wanted to tell her no, but I knew she'd know it was a lie. Because the truth was, I didn't want anyone to see her at my house, especially not Helen, whose friends all had brothers and sisters who went to my school. If Katie and Will heard about it, they would never shut up. Mei Li's whole face turned red. Forget it, she shouted. Then without another word, she turned back round and began walking off as fast as she could. I looked at her, wondering if she was still going to get me the freedom pass I needed, and wishing I kept my mouth shut tight.
Hello, my name is Mrs. Reed, and I'm the Senko for Transition Year 7 and Year 8. Chapter 18, The Night Riders. When I got home, I was feeling so twitchy that I locked myself away in my room until tea. As soon as it was over, I ran back upstairs and looked out of my window every few minutes to see if Mei Li was coming. But she wasn't there at 6 o'clock, or at 6:30, or at 6:45. By the time the clock on my computer said 7, I was sure she wasn't coming, which meant I wouldn't be able to help Thomas catch the thief, which meant nobody would know that I hadn't got Thomas in trouble on purpose. If, of course, the thief was even going to be at St. Paul's Cathedral and not somewhere else tonight. I sat down on my bed and thought about what to do. If only I'd kept my mouth shut and not let Mei Li know that I didn't want anyone to see me with her. But why did she care so much anyway? Why did I care so much? A stone hit my window and rattled down the slates on the roof over the front door. I jumped to my feet. Another big stone came hurtling to the glass. I ran over and threw open the large side window. Mei Li was outside the front gate, crouching behind the small garden wall. I waved and smiled, but she didn't smile back. Taking something bright blue out of her coat pocket, she stood up and, looking around quickly to make sure no one was coming, threw it as hard as she could at my window. It hit the windowsill and fell straight back down into the garden. Covering her mouth with her hands to stop herself from squealing, Mei Li crouched down. Before I could tell her that I would run down and get it, she squeaked open the front gate, grabbed the bright blue object and ran back out again. I leaned out of my window as far as I could without falling and waited. Mei Li drew back her arm again. This time, the small flat parcel twirled through the air like a ninja dart and smacked me right in the face. Ow! I groaned, waving to show Mei Li that I caught it. But she was already gone. She hadn't even stopped to wish me good luck. Rubbing my face, I closed the window and opened up the blue wallet. Inside it on the left side was Maylee's granddad's freedom pass, with a photo and name on the date stamped on it. I stared at the photo, wondering how Maylee thought I could ever get away with pretending to be her 87-year-old granddad. For one thing, his face looked like melting wax, and his eyes were so droopy and long, they looked as if they were trying to reach the floor. For another, he had shocking white hair all over his head. I was definitely going to need a hat and a really long scarf and my puff jacket. Opposite the freedom pass was a torn bit of paper tucked away inside the plastic. It said, "Don't lose this. Good luck, Maylee." Snapping the wallet shut and putting it into my pocket, I snuck my winter puffer coat from the hallway and borrowed Dad's posh walking cap and his extra long stripy scarf from the hook of his bedroom door and stuffed them all into my rucksack, along with some chocolate bars in case I got hungry. When there was nothing left to do, I played my games until it was time for lights out. Mum and Dad always said goodnight at 9:30 and wanted our lights off by 10 when they were home, so I knew they would check if for any lights under my door after then. Lying down in the dark, I waited for the luminous hands of the clock to tell me it was 11 o'clock. The minute hand crawled its way along the clock face, slower than I'd ever seen it move before. 10, 11, 10, 15, 10, 21, 10, 23, 10, 30. I could feel myself dozing off. I slapped my cheeks and pulled my eyes open with my fingers. There was no way I could fall asleep. Not tonight. 10:33. 10:40. At 10:42, I could still hear Mum and Dad downstairs laughing at something on the TV. By 10:45, I couldn't wait anymore and slowly crept out of bed. Trying not to make the floorboards creak, I piled a heap of clothes under my covers and shaped it to look like a long body, just like I'd seen in the movies. Then I pulled my overstuffed rucksack onto my back and headed to the window. It was my only way out. The front door was too close to where Mum and Dad were, and chances were they had already turned on the alarm for it anyway. The street outside looked quiet and empty, as if it was drowsy and half asleep too. I listened and waited. Mum and Dad laughed loudly again. Taking my chance, I quickly undid the latch and pushed open the big window. It gave off a loud squeak, making me instantly pause and listen. There was no movement on the stairs, so after waiting another moment, I climbed onto the ledge, swinging one leg out and over into the air. Sitting in the middle of the windowsill, I looked down. All I had to do was drop onto the little roof running below me and then lower myself to the gravel below. Without making a single noise, it had looked easy in the daylight, but now the ground seemed so far away it might as well have been 70 floors down. I thought of what Maylee had said, "You just have to be brave too and not mess it up." I'd show her. I gripped the side of the ledge and wriggled myself out and over and down. Clinging on to the last bit of my window with my fingers, I felt around with my toes for the roof below, but it was too far away, and my legs were too short. I couldn't reach it. With a breath, I let go, hoping the roof was only a short drop away. Thud, thump, crash, meow, crunch. I opened my eyes. I was lying on my back on top of my rucksack in the garden. I had made it all in one go. The light clicked on from behind the front door. I rolled myself at top speed into the shrub and lay flat on my tummy, trying not to get any dirt into my mouth. The garden lit up as the front door swung open. "What is it?" called Mum from inside the house. At that moment, the cats I had disturbed meowed again from somewhere nearby. "Just next door's cat," Dad shouted back. "I heard the door shut as he went back inside." Feeling more grateful than I'd ever felt for the existence of cats, I waited for a few more seconds before rolling out of the shrubs like a spy and making my way to the front gate. Wishing I could have brought my skateboard with me, I began to run as fast as I could to the main road and past the railings of the empty park. It was all locked up and shining in the moonlight like a playing field built for ghosts. Halfway down the road, I could see the light of a bus stop and the shape of an old man sitting underneath it. "There you are," said Thomas, getting up from the bright red plastic bench he had been sitting on. Looking at me, his beard made way for a grin. "What happened to you? Trouble leaving paradise?" I looked down and realised I had 2 squashed slugs and a trail of dirt running all the way down the front of my hoodie. "Ugh!" I cried, jumping back and trying to get away from myself. "Hold still," said Thomas, chuckling as he swiped the slugs away from me and sent them flying into the night air like half-melted gummy bears. "Now hurry! The bus will be here in a few minutes. Malcolm is never late." Nodding, I quickly pulled out my puffer coat and Dad's scarf and hat from my rucksack and put them on. Thomas grabbed the scarf and twirled me round like a giant piece of candy floss until everything on my face except my eyes were covered. Said Thomas, stepping back to look at me. "You're not tall enough to pass for a grown man. Hunch your back right down, as if you're looking for a penny on the ground." I did what he said. Good. Keep that scarf high around your face and your hat pulled low so no one of your hair shows, and at the back bent right over, and shake it a bit when you walk too. Think it might be the only way you can pass yourself off for an 87-year-old night rider. If no one looks too closely, of course, he frowned. "We'll have to do something about your hair." He tried to push my floppy brown hair back underneath Dad's hat, but my hair was too slippery and long, and the hat was too small. "Sorry, Dad, we'll have to do a hat swap," said Thomas, taking off Dad's cap and plonking his yellow hat on my head instead. I promised my head I would clean it with disinfectant and the strongest shampoo ever invented as soon as this was all over. "Right, now remember," said Thomas, as he helped me zip up my rucksack and put it on my back, on over my bulky layers. "We've got 2 buses to catch to get to St. Paul's. When we're getting on, act sleepy. Look at the floor and just grunt when you show your pass. Got that? And whatever you do not make eye contact." As he talked, a big red bus appeared from round the corner, getting closer and closer until it eventually came to a halt in front of us. "Here we go," Thomas whispered. "Ready?" Before I could respond, the doors whacked open and a voice called out, "Hey, Thomas, all right?" "Hey, Malcolm. Yeah, just the usual chills," said Thomas, rubbing his arms as he climbed on board. "Got a friend coming with me tonight? Come on, Mr. Zoo. Up you get, old timer." Coughing, I pretend I was old and bending over to look at the invisible penny. I climbed up onto the step of the bus. Getting out the freedom pass, I held it out, my eyes looking at nothing but the shiny grey plastic floor. "No need for that, Mr. Zoo," said Malcolm. "Any night rider who's a friend of Thomas is welcome aboard my boat." And with a loud ding-dong, he slammed the doors shut and launched his bus boat deep into the pitch black sea of the roads ahead.